TJ Technologies is proud to sponsor today's Farm Basics. Micronutrients are essential for healthy and productive growth in lawns, gardens, and crops. Check us out at tjmicromix.com because it's the little things that make a big difference.
Our Farm Basics topic today is, why do farmers turn cattle out in the corn stalks? Well, we're not in a cornfield right now because it's a little tough for you to see when we're standing in 10-foot tall corn. But we are in front of a soybean field right now where the plants are really leaned over. They're what we call lodged. When you have a lodging problem in soybeans, corn, wheat, any crop that there is, some of the grain ends up on the ground. When the grain ends up on the ground, modern harvesting equipment can't pick it up. The only thing that can pick it up, other than your brother, is if you send some cattle out to the field to clean up any corn that would be out there.
Well, it seems to be a pretty good use for livestock to clean up all that extra grain that's out in the field. They can do it. They're going to be out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with nothing else to do, and they work pretty cheap, so why not? Well, you think about cattle, and when we get into the fall, in the pastures, they probably have the grass grazed down fairly well. So what do farmers have for choices with their cattle and what they're going to do? They're either going to feed them hay that they've either purchased or could sell, so it's pretty high value hay, or they're going to feed them corn, or they could turn them out into the corn stalks and let them find the corn themselves. Cattle will actually chew on the stalks and the corn out in the fields, and this is a good thing until we get some snow and it gets to be a little tough for them to get around.
But it is a nice thing for a couple of different reasons. First of all, a lot of that corn would just be lost. If the farmer goes through with his combine and some of the corn ends up on the ground, it happens in every field every year. Sometimes it's much worse than other times. But the point is, if it ends up on the ground, it's probably just lost unless you send the cattle out there to go get it. So basically, it's free food for the cattle, maybe even for 2 or 3 months in the fall. The other thing that's nice is if a farmer doesn't clean up that corn, that becomes a weed the following year in whatever crop he's raising. Like, let's say, for example, the farmer plants soybeans the next year, any of that corn grows, that's volunteer corn that next year, and the farmer has to spend money to control it. So you get a double win when you turn the cattle out into the cornfield.
Well, okay, let's look at the alternative. Let's say the farmer baled up those corn stalks, brought them into his place, fed them to the cattle in a feedlot, and then hauled the manure back out to the field. Basically, you've accomplished the same end result as you would if you just turned the cattle out in the corn stalks, let them graze the stalks themselves, and the manure is actually spread throughout the field for you. So it works out pretty good for farmers, especially because they don't want to have to spend all the time feeding those cattle every day. It's a lot better when they can just find their own feed as a farmer finishes up harvest, gets his fertilizer spread, and perhaps tillage done as well.
Okay, so it is pretty good, but that's the problem, is the farmer is not able to do the tillage if the cattle are out there. He's not able to get his field ready to go for spring, so all that work then gets pushed off into the spring. The other thing is, if a farmer turns his cattle out, they may cause a slight degree of compaction, not a real big deal. But what I worry about more than that is, a lot of times farmers will spray a product called Tordon out in their pastures. And Tordon is phenomenal at killing thistles, leafy spurge, and a number of other weeds in pastures. The only problem with the Tordon is, if cattle eat it, it's not going to hurt the cattle at all. But if they then get turned out into the corn stalks, some of their manure will contain a small amount of Tordon, and they'll kill soybeans the following year.
Well, similar to what you'll see in your yard if you let your dog go out in the same spot all winter. There could be some spots out there that now you have to reseed some grass into. Well, out in cornfields, for example, you can fix that problem by just feeding your cattle in your feedlot or around your place something other than grass hay that's been treated with Tordon or Milestone or something like that.
Or not have them out in the pasture after Tordon has been sprayed. If they spray 2,4-D or a product with very little residual, there's no problem. It's not going to hurt the cattle, and then that would not carry over to next year's crop.
Well, that's such a small concern, Brand. There's so many benefits turning cattle into the corn stalks. It gives the cattle a food source. They can rummage through and find any ears that have fallen off or even some kernels that may have spilled out at one point or another throughout the field. They get the nutrition they need, or most of the nutrition they need, and farmers can go about doing the rest of it.
Right, and then you don't have volunteer corn as a weed the next year. Well, our Weed of the Week is not volunteer corn, but we'll tell you what it is coming up later in the show.